The night cracked open with a small, quiet tragedy that almost no one noticed. The kind that hides in plain sight under warm lights and clinking plates. 3 little boys sat at a round table meant for 4, their feet swinging above the floor, their untouched food cooling fast, their eyes searching the room with the patient hope only children still believe in. They were dressed neatly, identical curls brushed back, identical hands folded, identical silence wrapping them like a fragile shell. In a restaurant full of sound and laughter, the triplets' quiet felt louder than anything else, and somewhere in that stillness, something was about to change lives in ways no one could have predicted. Before the story pulls you deeper, take a moment right now. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of human connection, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach the hearts that need them most. The restaurant was one of those polished places that whispered wealth without trying too hard, all soft jazz, dim amber lighting, and menus that felt heavier than some books. The triplets had been seated carefully by a nervous hostess who had tried smiling extra wide, as if smiles could replace conversation. Their father was supposed to arrive any minute, or so she had been told, but minutes have a way of stretching painfully when you are 7 years old and the world feels too big. The boys were deaf from birth, a fact that shaped every corner of their lives, and tonight it shaped the way they waited, communicating with quick, practiced movements of their hands, their faces mirroring one another with a mix of hunger, confusion, and disappointment. Across the room, at a small table near the window, sat a man whose life had been worn thin by responsibility. He was a single father, shoulders slightly hunched not from age but from carrying too much alone for too long. His jacket was frayed at the cuffs, his eyes tired in a way that suggested sleepless nights and early mornings, and yet there was a gentleness about him that refused to be extinguished. He was there with his daughter, a little girl with bright eyes and a careful seriousness that came from growing up faster than she should have had to. He noticed the triplets not because they were loud or disruptive, but because they were so painfully quiet. The man had learned sign language years ago, not as a hobby or a skill to show off, but out of necessity and love. His late wife had been deaf, and learning her language had been his first act of devotion, a bridge built word by word, sign by sign. After she passed, that language became a memory he carried carefully, afraid of losing it, afraid of losing her all over again. Life after her death had been a relentless balancing act, juggling work that barely paid the bills, parenting without a partner, and grief that never truly loosened its grip. Still, he showed up every day, because that was what love demanded. The triplets' father was late because power had a way of pulling him in 100 directions at once. He was a CEO, the kind whose name appeared in business magazines and conference headlines, whose phone never stopped vibrating with crises that felt urgent but were often hollow. That evening, a board meeting had run long, arguments looping endlessly, egos clashing, time slipping through his fingers. He had promised his son's dinner, a rare break from nannies and assistants, a moment of normalcy. By the time he realized how late it was, guilt slammed into him with a force no corporate failure ever had. Back at the table, the boy's patience began to fray. One poked at his food, another rested his chin in his hands. The third scanned the room again, eyes landing on families laughing together, parents leaning close to their children. They signed softly to each other, small hands moving quickly, questions passing between them that had no comforting answers yet. The hostess checked in again, her smile thinner now, her eyes apologetic, but there was little she could do except refill water glasses and hope. The single father felt a familiar ache in his chest, the same ache that came whenever he saw children waiting for something that might not come. He hesitated, knowing how easily good intentions could be misunderstood in a world that taught suspicion first. But his daughter nudged his arm gently, her gaze fixed on the boys, her expression asking without words. He nodded, a quiet decision settling in his bones, and stood up. He approached slowly, respectfully, careful not to startle them. When the boys looked up, their eyes widened in unison, curiosity flickering. He raised his hands, hesitated just a second longer, and then began to sign. The movements were a little rusty but unmistakable, shaped by years of love and loss. He signed something simple, kind, asking if they were okay, telling them they were not invisible. The effect was immediate and breathtaking. The tension melted from their shoulders, replaced by surprise, then delight. Smiles spread across three identical faces like sunlight breaking through clouds. They signed back enthusiastically, hands flying, faces animated, relief pouring out of them now that someone finally spoke their language. The man listened with his eyes, nodding, responding, laughter softening his features as the boys shared their story in fragments and expressions. Other diners glanced over, drawn by the sudden brightness of the moment, though they could not hear a thing. It was cinematic in its quiet beauty, a pocket of connection carved out of a crowded room. Time passed differently then. Plates were forgotten, phones ignored. The man's daughter watched with wonder, absorbing a lesson no classroom could teach, seeing how her father's grief had quietly become a gift. The triplets laughed, their earlier loneliness fading into something warm and safe. For the first time that evening, they felt seen not as a complication or an inconvenience, but simply as children. When their father finally arrived, breathless and flustered, he froze at the sight before him. He took in the scene slowly, the stranger signing easily with his sons, their faces lit with joy, the way they leaned forward eagerly. Confusion gave way to something heavier, something like shame and gratitude colliding in his chest. This powerful man, who commanded rooms and controlled markets, felt suddenly small, confronted with how close he had come to failing where it mattered most. He approached quietly, not wanting to break the moment, and watched for a few seconds that stretched into something like an awakening. He saw his sons not waiting anymore, not lonely, but alive with happiness. When the man finally noticed him and gently stepped back, the CEO signed his thanks with hands that trembled just a little, emotion making his movements less polished. The exchange between the two men was brief but profound, an unspoken understanding passing between them about love, loss, and the strange ways life offers redemption. The rest of the evening unfolded softly. The boys ate with renewed appetite, their energy infectious. The CEO sat with them, fully present now, phone silenced, priorities reordered in real time. Across the room, the single father returned to his table, his heart unexpectedly lighter, his daughter beaming with pride. He had not fixed the world or changed his circumstances, but he had mattered in a way that lingered. Days later, a letter arrived at his modest apartment, thick paper bearing a name he recognized instantly. Inside were words of thanks, sincere and unguarded, and an offer that felt almost unreal. The CEO had not forgotten the man who spoke to his sons when he could not. He wanted to help, not with charity that bruised pride, but with opportunity, a job that valued empathy as much as skill, flexibility that understood family, a chance to breathe again. Accepting it was not easy. Pride wrestled with necessity, fear with hope. But in the end, the single father chose faith over fear, honoring the memory of his wife who had taught him that accepting help could also be an act of courage. The new job did not erase his struggles overnight, but it softened the edges, gave him space to be more than just tired and surviving. Months passed, and lives slowly intertwined. The families met again, not as strangers this time, but as something closer to friends. The triplets adored the man who had once been a lifeline in a restaurant, and his daughter found joy in teaching them games she loved, adapting, learning, growing alongside them. The CEO learned to slow down, to listen with more than his ears, to show up in ways that could not be scheduled. The restaurant incident became a quiet legend among them, retold not for drama but for meaning. It reminded them that the smallest moments often carry the greatest weight, that kindness offered without expectation can ripple outward in ways no one can control. It showed that being heard is not about sound, but about presence. As the story nears its close, pause with me for a moment. If this journey has touched your heart, if it has reminded you of the power of empathy and simple human connection, please engage with this video, like it, share it, and let your support help this message travel further than we ever could alone. Just before we end, here is a special request from the heart. Please comment below and share what this story made you feel, or a moment when kindness changed your life, because your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. In the end, nothing about that night was planned. 3 deaf boys sat alone, a single father carried an old language in his hands, and a powerful man learned a humbling lesson far from any boardroom. The world did not change all at once, but it shifted just enough to let light in. And sometimes, that is more than enough to make all the difference.